everyone. This is always an interesting one to do, and it's especially interesting today, considering that Microsoft made some announcements last night in one of their blogs. So it had us scrambling to update our slides a little bit for this one. But for those of you that might have seen this one before, at least there'll be some new material for you. When we start talking about any kind of unified messaging option, it's always kind of good to lay out our bona fides. And in this case, in the unified messaging area, we were here first. We are actually the company that had unified messaging before anyone else. We've been doing it a long time. We're recognized by most of the analysts as being the leader in unified messaging and all those things that surround it. So we do have some experience, and that experience is going to come into play particularly in the subject for this webinar. And our experience is in the same kind of customers who are going to attend this webinar because they're a larger enterprise. There might be some smaller enterprise customers that have the issues that this webinar is going to address, but generally it tends to be the larger customers. And we've been in the larger market for a long time now. We did start as a small voicemail company years ago, focusing on branch offices and smaller systems. But as we spent more and more time talking to customers and realized what the challenges were for the enterprise, we felt there was an opportunity for us there. And so we moved our product focus upscale. And as you can see from these kind of general reference points here, this is the market we're in. We are in the large enterprise unified communications market. And in that market, we have a wide range of offerings, all on a single product, but all a little bit different in terms of what they do. And this is a really nice menu to pick and choose from for people because it allows them to fix whatever current problem they have in their system with a first-rate solution, but also be putting in a platform that can be expanded into other solutions as the needs become apparent within the enterprise. Today, we're going to talk about the unified messaging part of the solution primarily, and the interoperability piece that plays into that really comes down to kind of our history. What we've always believed is we should be able to walk in with our product, tell you what we do, convince you to buy our product, and not give you that list of all the things you have to tear out and update in order to get the functionality we're discussing. We are experts in interoperability. We will work in your enterprise the way you're configured today, and also if you have plans to move ahead and modernize parts of your infrastructure, our solution will move forward with that effort. So it's a very safe choice in general to have our solutions in, particularly in this world where things keep changing, whether we want them to change or not. And in this case, we're on one of those or not situations where people who are using Exchange Online unified messaging and a PBX on-site, an on-site PBX connected up into the cloud to the Exchange servers in the cloud, were given a deadline last year. Microsoft announced they would be discontinuing support. The way they announced it, they would no longer support the session border controllers, but what that really meant is they wouldn't support the application. And that created quite a bit of concern and scrambling as people, they gave a year notice, and that was very difficult for larger enterprises to actually be able to do what needed to be done within a year. And as we've come down to the deadline, it's been more and more obvious that people were still scrambling a bit. And they've changed their announcements a couple of times along the way. They made a new blog post and then pulled it off. And it's been very confusing for customers to understand what they should do. And Microsoft did it again last night with a new blog posting. And this one hopefully will stay up longer than the last one did. But it basically is the same content as the last one. This one, though, is a good news, bad news announcement. The good news is knowing how confusing it's been and difficult for enterprise customers to be able to focus in on what needed to be done and get it done, and even in that one-year time frame, they now have extended that time frame out. They've now extended it out until April 30th of 2019. So whereas you were down to your last 4 or 5 weeks here yesterday, today now you have a little more time. However, the way they're dealing with the announcement, maybe time is not quite as the time frames maybe aren't quite as good as they sound. We'll go through and talk about what this announcement lays out because it's really critical to kind of the way we're presenting our product as a solution to this. But keep in mind, Microsoft is very fluid And the wording of this announcement, this blog post, and you'll have it when you download the slides if you don't already have it, is very interesting in that they're saying, be careful what you do, more changes are coming. And we'll talk a little bit about what we think that might be, although we can't announce anything for Microsoft. But at the same time, it does argue a great deal of caution in what solution you go forward with. But let's define the problem first. This is something that I think those of you that have the problem know pretty well. You could have deployed Exchange online, kept your current PBX on site, and the way that worked is when somebody sent a call to that phone and it went unanswered, it would ring out through typically a SIP media gateway, off maybe an SBC on your site, through a firewall across the internet, and into an SBC at Microsoft's hosting site, up where Office 365 lives, through that and directly connected to the Exchange Online server. And then that server would answer, it would play the prompts to the caller, and they would leave a message, and you would now have that message in your Exchange inbox as a voicemail and all the functionality that went along with that. There's a slight variation of this, which is basically the same thing, except some PBX manufacturers modified their SIP trunks in such a manner as they could connect directly. They didn't need any sort of gateway. They'd go straight out through the local firewall and SBC and into Exchange the same way. But both of these were the ways that people could continue to keep their investment in their on-site PBX and the functionality of those PBXs, which is was considerably more functionality there than you really could get by moving to Skype. The problem now being is they have announced that now, April of next year, unfortunately there's a little more time, they will no longer allow that connection. And so they're not supporting the SBC, the Session Border Controller on site. Now what that really means is you can no longer connect your PBX directly to Exchange the way you might have it set up today. And they've given us some hints here in what they want you to do to get around that. But because it's not available, customers that are using that have to change. They have to find a new way to get that functionality in, and they have a couple of options. We're going to talk about those in the next slide. But also, there's as we've done this webinar numerous times, we've talked to a lot of people that have been on the webinar and said, no, we haven't done that yet, but we were planning to. We have a major push to go to Office 365 over the next 6 months, 1 year, whatever, and we're using Exchange on site, and our intention was to move it up into the cloud, and now we found out we can't. So both the customers that have already done it and the customers that are looking towards moving to Office 365, this has become a major issue. And you have to solve that issue by putting some planning together and spending some money, and that's all very difficult to do in a limited time frame. Now you have longer now, and that's good, but you still probably need to address this in a pretty timely fashion. Now what Microsoft says is when this is no longer available, when they won't support the direct PBX connections, you have 3 options. Now this is a major change from their original blog posting that said you had 4 options. What they've done is removed support for one of the options. We'll talk about that in just a second. Option 1 for them is basically throw away your on-site resources, your PBX, get everything from the cloud. In other words, use the Cloud PBX as your cloud phone system. And the Cloud PBX is fairly new and very low in features and does not have any APIs, which means, unlike Skype, which when they deployed it was very low on features from a phone system point of view, but had great APIs that allowed hundreds of third-party applications to bring that application up to speed where you could use it, that can't be done today. There's no APIs published for the Cloud PBX, which means all you have is what Microsoft's put in it, and that's not very much. So option 1 you can look at, but we haven't found a customer yet that has really been able to pare down the functionality they need from a telephone so low that it'll fit into the Cloud PBX. Option 2 says, use Microsoft as your phone system on site by deploying Skype for Business, the enterprise version. So now get rid of your PBX on site, the traditional one, and move to the Skype in your on-premise, and they will allow that to connect up to your Exchange Online account. So if you were already looking perhaps at moving to Skype for your PBX, that might be an option you'd consider. But the the effort needed and the change involved in moving to Skype as your PBX on site is fairly massive and very expensive from both a deployment, a disruption of business, and a licensing point of view. So your two Microsoft options are really not very strong. And in all our discussions over the last year that we've been dealing with customers, very few have really considered seriously either of the Microsoft options. What they had considered was option 3, which is on here, and then the original option 3. So there used to be a third option that was use a third-party gateway, and they had listed originally a couple of gateways from a couple of different manufacturers, and that would allow you to connect. You put a partial Skype deployment in, and you could connect up to Exchange Online UM. This is the one they've said, no, we no longer can certify that one. And the way they've worded it makes it sound like we don't want to encourage people to do that because we're not going to support it for very long. And it sounds to us like what they're saying is Exchange UM in the cloud goes away completely, and maybe even Exchange UM on the enterprise in the next version of Exchange goes away. They're definitely shying away from anything that relies on that. They don't want customers to pay money to move to that option 3, the old option 3. So now there's only option 3. There's not 3 and 4. And 3 is using a third-party voicemail, similar to our solution, that can be on site, connect to your legacy PBX, and still put the messages up into Exchange Online. Doesn't use Exchange UM Online. It just uses the basic Exchange functionality to do it, but it gives you the same kind of functionality. So option 3 is the one that I think most people, after they now look at what their options are going to say that's really the only safe way for me to go. Unless I can skinny down my needs for telephone communications so low that they fit into option 1, or unless I'm happy, let's say maybe already looking at going to Skype on premise, and that sudden cost and work is something we were already going to do, most people are going to be looking at option 3. And option 3 says you can, hook a third-party voicemail up to your PBX. And in our case, that third-party voicemail will also still let you put messages into the Exchange server online. So you'll still have on your Office 365 Exchange, you'll still get your voice messages with the forms and all the same functionality. So that's probably the way that, from a cost point of view and a disruption of business point of view, is the best option. And we think it's also the best option because it's not something new and untried. We have been connecting to Exchange for years, Exchange Online and on the enterprise both. So we have hundreds and hundreds of customers who are already using this solution that we're proposing. In the area of unified messaging, we've been around a long time. One of the things you'll get as part of this webinar is the white paper that TechTarget did, talking about UM in general, and in particular what we've done in the area of UM and how to prepare, what to look at so there are no surprises. And as you look through that, you'll find that this is something that's been happening for years now. This is a fairly safe and tested option. Our unified messaging that we've put out there for years now, we can use multiple email systems. If you have multiple emails in your enterprise, you can connect them all to a single system. They can be premise or cloud-based or both. If you're in the middle of a migration from one kind of system to the other, our system will bridge between those. Multiple domains are no problem for this kind of solution for us. So because we've been doing this for so long and we're so flexible, ours really is the easiest solution to cover whatever you need to do. And it can still give you that single view of voice, fax, and email all in the inbox in Exchange Online, and functionality, very minor changes. And there's some other options available as well with some more secure ways to do messaging on a per user basis. So as we look at this kind of functionality that we've been doing for years, it now applies perfectly in this situation. So here's how our solution would work. We're still going to connect to Exchange Online. We're just not going to use the UM software piece. We don't need the border controller because we're not going to send a phone call up there. In our solution, the AVST product, the CXE, goes on site, connects to your PBX, and by the way, we connect to any PBX and multiple PBXs. So if you have a complex environment with 4 or 5 different manufacturers' PBXs, you can still integrate everything to a single CXE system and solve this problem. In this case now, phone rings, doesn't get answered, forwards to the CXE system, which is on site. CXE platform answers, plays the user's greeting, records the messages, does the automated attendant, does the speech directory, all that functionality is happening, but it's now happening on site. After the message is recorded, CXE moves the message across the data channel outside the firewall through the internet, and using the Microsoft APIs, the EWS and Graph APIs, puts it straight into the user's inbox with the message class to make it all work the same. So basically, the big difference here is the phone call doesn't have to connect. The phone call is all handled locally, only the message has to be moved. And the phone call being handled locally also means that you're not at the mercy of the network connection. If the network connection up to Exchange fails or gets really, really, really slow like it does sometimes, the calls will still get answered and handled on site without any problem at all. So if you look at the option 3, the original option 3, which was use a third-party gateway from a TE, their AnyNode product, or the Audio Codes brand new product that they made, where the call would still go through and connect to the Microsoft Exchange server. And people looked at this and said, well, this looks good. It's the least expensive to deploy. And they were looking at this. This is the one where Microsoft's now said they won't certify it. And we believe what they're saying is that Exchange piece in the cloud and Office 365 will probably be what goes away next. Not just the server, the SBC controller, but eventually probably Exchange as a function. And again, our situation, we don't care. We're just using Exchange as a message store, and we're going to only move the message. And we do things with a cache and things like that to minimize bandwidth, and it makes us more tolerant from a latency point of view. So basically, our solution is probably the safest choice for you to do. It's actually, in a lot of ways, architecturally better than your current solution if you're moving the calls, all the calls up to Exchange Online. And keep in mind, this architecture is not new. This isn't something we did when Microsoft announced they weren't going to support the border controller anymore. This is 10-year-old functionality from our point of view, connecting up into the cloud to put messages up there. Like I say, we have hundreds and hundreds of enterprise references doing this, and it's, we've been through adding functionality for years to this product. It's very robust. It has more functionality than your existing Exchange Online has today. If you do go down this road, you're going to get a nice replacement piece. Like we said, whatever your PBX is, this option is going to be open to you. You'll continue using Exchange Online, and if you want, you can even continue using the Microsoft Outlook forms that you're using today. So when a user gets a message, it'll have the same look and feel. Now, that is not a perfect solution because we can't do everything that those forms do. But playing the message through the speaker, replying to the message, saving the message, deleting the message, playing the message, all of that will be identical. But some of the things like playing the message through the telephone from the Outlook form, that won't function. What we really recommend is replace the Exchange Outlook forms with our forms. And then you'll not only get all that functionality that you had before, but you'll get a lot of other functionality that's built into our forms that goes way beyond what you have today. And all of the PBX functions, when you call in to get messages over the phone, that will all be done with our product. So that will be a little bit different as well. The way you set up greetings and everything else. We still have message waiting. We still have better notification, out call and SMS notification, but there will be a slight change. Our goal here is to minimize the disruption to your business when you move from Exchange Online to our product. And while it isn't 100% the same, it is very, very close, and we're comfortable that a migration can be made with minimal effort. And once you have our product in place, there's a lot of those other applications that we showed in that slide in the very beginning that you can now look at, things that we do that go far beyond what you had with Exchange And some of these things are really, really influencers in terms of how you can run your business and how your employees can be productive and security and all of those pieces. So If you're also still looking or thinking about moving to Skype for Business, our product is the only other product besides Exchange with a full integration to Skype for Business. So you could actually have half your organization on Skype for Business, half on your traditional PBX, and still be using a single CXE system to support them. We've been working with Skype integration for years. A long time ago, Microsoft came to us and said, we have a little bit of a problem with our Skype deployments where if we only use Exchange from a security point of view, we have customers telling us that they don't feel comfortable storing their messages in Exchange. So to help with that solution, we developed an integration to Skype for Business. And we've been doing that along with Microsoft for years now. So if you are going to also consider migrating to Skype down the road as perhaps your PBX asset gets down to the point where you're comfortable replacing it, keep in mind we are definitely the correct solution there. We looked at Microsoft years ago when they first started getting into our, the same space we were in. We realized who they are. We realized they're an influencer. And so we worked really hard to build our relationship with Microsoft. And that involves a number of pieces, not the least of which is we went out and made ourselves a gold partner. And not just a standard gold partner, we're one of the few companies in the country that has a dual gold partner status with competency and certification in both communications and messaging. And that puts us in a unique place for dealing with these kind of opportunities where you're kind of going through the Microsoft infrastructure in various places. And we're really completely ready to support almost any kind of connection out there in terms of working with Microsoft. Now, this next slide is an interesting one. As this first happened, as it was announced, and corporations were kind of floundering a little bit, trying to figure out what to do, one of the big problems we found they had was there was no money in the budget for a massive infrastructure upgrade. And that's just not an easy thing to do. And that's delayed a lot of these solutions. We're still talking to people last week who thought the deadline was coming up soon, who really believe that that they would have to search hard and long to find the money to do this. So to help with that, we put in place an incentive program. And the incentive program is still in place today, although it expires when the original Microsoft deadline expires in April of this year. We may extend it, but I doubt we'll extend it for a year. But it is still in place, and it will give you a much more easy method to get in terms of lowering the cost of our solution. It's only available when you're replacing an existing Exchange online scenario, and you can talk to any one of our dealers or talk to us directly, and we will explain what this incentive is. It's a fairly significant incentive in terms of software discounts and things along those lines. So what's changed today from yesterday is the pressure's off a little bit, but now what we're gonna see is what else is Microsoft going to change in the next 6 months? Because they're definitely doing things in the background there that are going to have an effect on this. But you can feel safe with the alternative that we're offering, that it's going to function no matter what Microsoft does. So I think now we're ready to see if there's any questions.
There are some questions. Thanks very much, Neil. For those who might like to submit a question, if you haven't done that already, use the orange arrow in that upper corner, and then you'll see all of the options. The question box should be toward the bottom. Neil, first question. So option 2 is Skype on-prem, not cloud Skype, correct?
That's correct. It's the full deployment of the enterprise version of Skype where your telephone system is on-prem, but it is Skype and not the traditional PBX.
Okay. Next, if a customer already deployed a gateway, does this mean we have to move to one of the other options?
Yeah. Well, no. But if you read Microsoft's wording, I believe what they're saying is you don't have to move yet, but they've got, and I think this is really what has triggered our speculation. It sounds like what they're saying is we don't want to encourage you to do that because we're going to take away that support in the near future. Now that's us guessing that. That's not Microsoft saying that. But no, there is nothing in this announcement that says tomorrow your gateway won't work. But if that gateway was considered a long-term solution for you, I would think you would want to have a serious conversation with Microsoft at this point.
Okay, next, what about voicemail transcription?
So we do voicemail transcription today in a method slightly different than they do. In other words, you'd get your voicemail message in your email inbox, and then you get a second message with the transcription. This is being changed in our next software release. We'll do it the same way where we have it embedded inside. It is an option on our product, so it is a separate option you would purchase, but it is available.
Okay, next, can the AVST solution also integrate with other Cloud PBX providers?
Yeah, I can't give you a blanket on everybody because those guys are popping up so fast. But we have BroadSoft integrations and Cisco integrations and GenBand integrations, and just about everybody out there that's a major player in the enterprise space for hosting PBXs, we've developed an integration with.
Okay, next, two-part question. We have from Cisco to Office 365. Is this impacted? Actually, you know what? I'll just ask this. It's a separate question. Sorry. Did you get that? We have from Cisco to Office 365.
So depending on how you have it, it might be impacted. You could have done it two ways with Cisco. You could be doing it through the session border controller, or you could be doing it the way we do it through the separate API, the EWS API. Cisco supplies both. You'll really have to take a look at your system to figure out which you have.
Okay, next. Will this solution work with Microsoft Teams?
So Microsoft Teams falls into that same camp as the Cloud PBX in the sense that we've had discussions with them for almost a year now. Their goal is to provide APIs so third-party vendors can enhance that product. Those APIs have not yet been made available to us. We've been told by Microsoft they're on the way. So we would expect in the medium future, probably before the end of the year, that there's movement in that area and we can start building the kind of integrations we need to also use our solutions along with Teams.
Okay, next. We have SBC from audio codes to reroute Cisco calls to Skype for Business and vice versa. Is this impacted?
Oh yeah, that's exactly the first example I gave where the calls, if you have calls routed to Exchange Online, the calls are going up into the network, that's what will stop working. So now you have to find another choice.
Okay, okay, there is at least one more question. Just did a quick scroll here. What Cloud PBX providers, oh, you know what? This is just asking for a list of which Cloud PBX providers. So I don't know if you want to provide that offline or go through a few.
No, yeah, we'll get it offline because it's not just a list, it's a list with some explanation along with it. So.
Okay. And with that, so we'll follow up with the individual who asked that question. It looks like, unless there's anyone still typing, that this should be, looks like a wrap up of the questions. I think we got to all of them. We will, as I mentioned, we will forward some additional resources. Neil mentioned the Unified Messaging white paper. We're actually still working on updating our resource page today as per the change that Microsoft made to their announcement yesterday, although most of the assets that are there are still relevant. So when we send the follow-up email, we'll include some links there to additional resources. And if I didn't already mention it, we will also, any of you, all of you who asked questions, we'll make sure to follow up with you offline as well, just to make sure that we got all the information to you as you asked it, and that we didn't misunderstand any question or intent there. So just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. And Neil, thanks again, as always, for a super presentation. I'll go ahead and, Neil, if you want to give us some closing words as well.
Thank you. The one thing I would say, and I know we mentioned this in the webinar, if you had gone down the path of using one of those third-party gateways, I think it's essential for you to have a conversation with Microsoft, because they didn't really announce, exactly what's going on, other than telling people if you haven't done it now, don't go forward with it. It could be that they're only going to supply it until the same drop dead date of next April. We don't really know. So that's a conversation you should have. But thanks everybody for coming. If you have any other questions, you can always get in touch with us at info@avst.com, and we'd be happy to talk to you about this or any other communications need that you have.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.